Thank you all. Thank you all so much. It is wonderful, wonderful to be here again. And I want to start just by thanking Congressman Allison. Keith, thank you for that very warm introduction. But much more important than that, thank you for your partnership and your leadership in Washington. It goes without saying, I know you all know this, but the 5th District here in Minnesota is enormously lucky to have Congressman Ellison. But I can also say, as a lifelong Houser, and I can say that with pride in this room, we are all around the country lucky to have Keith Ellison in Congress. I have, over the last 22 months, had the chance to get to know him well and to have discussions about the impact the foreclosure crisis is having not just on owners, but on renters, how we stop the scourge of lead poisoning of our children, and as you will hear more about later, how we transform our rental programs from the 20th century programs that we have today into the 21st century programs that so many of you have shown us the way on here in Minnesota. So let me just say, and this is with no disrespect to his colleagues in the House, I wish every one of the congresspeople I could work with was like Keith Ellison. He's been a remarkable leader. Let's give him a hand. Let me also thank Senator Franken, who, among his many things that he's championed in housing, if you hadn't heard, was as a co-sponsor of the National Housing Trust Fund. And the broad range of leadership he's provided, the moral leadership as well as the legislative leadership on housing that we need in this crisis. Dan Bartholomew, who in many different careers now has been a remarkable leader. Dan, thank you. Thank you for your partnership and all the work on sustainable communities that you've done with me and my team. You've been remarkable. And finally, Chip Halbach with Minnesota Housing Partnerships. Chip, thank you. Chip and I have had the pleasure of working together, serving on boards together, and he's done a remarkable, remarkable job leading here as well. So you all are incredibly lucky to have this team here. And in fact, I always love coming back to Minnesota to hear what you're doing, because you are in so many ways on the leading edge of what it means to try not only to get affordable housing right, but to get community development right. You have been a bright, shining light across this country in the midst of this crisis. Thank you all for your leadership and the remarkable work that you're doing. Given the theme of the conference here, I particularly wanted to recognize the work that you've done on sustainable communities. You get it. And that work has always been important, but is particularly important today with so much on the line for our families and for our country. So let me try today to talk a little bit about what the Obama administration is doing to help you build the strong, inclusive, sustainable communities that Minnesota families need to succeed in the 21st century. I also want to talk about the historic affordable housing investments we've made over the last 22 months. And I want to talk about the way that we're trying to change the way we do business at HUD to get the most out of those investments, working with you to realize your vision for success, not the one-size-fits-all approach that HUD has taken, frankly, for too many years. As much as you all know, this work began with the Recovery Act, which has rebuilt thousands of homes, highways, and bridges, and put more than 3 million Americans back to work. And while we still have a long way to go, we now have 10 straight months, as of last Friday, 10 straight months of private sector job creation. When President Obama signed the Recovery Act into law, he said it would do 3 things: create jobs, we were losing over 750,000 jobs a month. It's so easy to forget that. It's not that long ago. And now 10 straight months of private sector job creation. But he also said it would help those harmed by the economic crisis and lay the foundation for long-term growth. Here in Minnesota, the Recovery Act is helping you realize all three of those goals in your communities. I saw it for myself at the Cedars in Minneapolis, where the $100 million HUD is providing Minnesota in public housing capital funds is helping create the nation's first green, culturally sensitive assisted living program. The Recovery Act is also jumpstarting the development of 32,000 affordable homes across the nation that were stuck in the pipeline by the recession through $2.25 billion in the tax credit assistance program, which alone is providing over $28 million to Minnesota. In less than 21 months, the Recovery Act has already finished renovating, in 21 months, finished renovating over 315,000 apartments around the country. Almost a quarter of public housing units have gotten some form of renovation thanks to the Recovery Act already. In addition, 18,000 new homes are under construction, and many of those to green standards with energy-efficient improvements, saving money for owners and for residents alike. In all, nearly a third of the $14 billion that we received at HUD in Recovery Act funding can be used for greening America's public and assisted housing stock, reducing energy costs, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and creating jobs. At the same time, the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program, which has provided about $22 million to Minnesota, has prevented and ended homelessness for more than 750,000 people around this country, and not a moment too soon in the midst of this economic crisis. No less an authority than the U.S. Conference of Mayors reports that HPRP is, quote-unquote, fundamentally changing the way communities respond to homelessness at the local level, keeping people in their homes rather than waiting for them to become homeless, and quickly returning those who fall into homelessness to the stable, permanent housing they need. Indeed, in many ways, it was HPRP that paved the way for Opening Doors, the first ever federal strategic plan to end homelessness, which I was proud to present to President Obama earlier this year, and which wouldn't have been possible without the efforts of so many of you here in this room. The most far-reaching and ambitious plan in our history to put the nation on a path toward ending all types of homelessness, and the culmination of more than a decade's work in communities around the country. This plan will end chronic homelessness and veterans homelessness in 5 years, while ending homelessness for families, youth, and children within a decade. The fact is, we have all proven that we can house anyone. Our job now is to house everyone, to prevent and end homelessness, all homelessness. And Carolyn, I know I have your support when I say, together, all of us in this room will end homelessness. Indeed, with our historic investments, a budget this year that includes full funding for the public housing operating subsidy, and a proposed budget for next year that includes, even in a very difficult fiscal environment, a record number of people to be served by the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and $1 billion to capitalize for the first time ever the National Housing Trust Fund, which, by the way, Senator Franken was a co-sponsor of. With all of these investments, it is very clear that the federal government is back in the affordable rental housing business, and it is about time that we were. But as Minnesota knows as well as anyone, and as this conference recognizes, affordable rental housing is only the first step toward building sustainable communities of opportunity and hope. That's what you're doing about a dozen blocks from here, where construction of a major light rail along University Avenue connecting Minneapolis and St. Paul has the potential to open up access to jobs and opportunity for the neighborhoods that it serves. Unlike the process that occurred 40 years ago, when an interstate was built to run directly through the Central Corridor, tearing apart neighborhoods and cutting them off from opportunity, third sector partners like Twin Cities LISC have worked to ensure that community stakeholders, from residents to local financial institutions, are at the table, engaged, and making their voices heard. It was that kind of holistic, community-driven model with creative, locally focused thinking from the bottom up that spurred the Obama administration to launch our Partnership for Sustainable Communities. Uniting the efforts of HUD, the Department of Transportation, and the Environmental Protection Agency, the idea behind the partnership is simple: to boost economic development and ensure that all Americans can afford to live in communities with access to employment, schools, and transportation options. Last month, with our partners in the Department of Transportation, we awarded nearly $170 million in planning grants to ensure both regions and local communities across the country have more housing and transportation options, more energy independence, and will be more economically competitive. For the first time in the history of federal grant competitions, these awards were jointly reviewed and selected by all three agencies: HUD, DOT, and EPA. Now, if you haven't been a federal bureaucrat, you may not understand quite what it means to have three agencies working together to award these funds. But this partnership isn't just about meetings and better coordination. It's about making sure that in a tight budget environment, our agencies are investing every taxpayer dime with precision. For these funds, we were inundated with applications from 49 states, 2 territories, and the District of Columbia, offering bold, unique proposals to plan and build sustainably based on local resources, local landscape, culture, and integrity. I'm proud that we awarded a $5 million award, a regional planning grant, to your Metropolitan Council right here in the Twin Cities.